I want to ask you about something that you have been criticized for lately, and that is sometimes putting your foot in your mouth. You knew what I was going to say before I even asked the question.
I know you've never done that.
And I was out with you last week in South Carolina, speaking to a number of voters at your rallies. And I will say, most of your supporters that I talk to, they don't seem to mind. They say that it's just, happens to all of us. We all put our foot in our mouth. Do you not feel that the details, not just the intentions, matter when you're making decisions as president?
Well, there are two fundamentally different questions you're asking me. When I stand, and you guys love to conflate these things. Number one is, I stood up and talked about pinning a medal on a young man who did not want the medal and was a brave, brave young man. I also talked about, up in the Upper Konar Valley, of another young man who engaged in a very brave act. Turns out, I believe it was General Rodriguez was up on that what they call forward operating base with only 6 or 8 people up there, and he pinned the Bronze Star on the young man up there. It wasn't the young man who got the Medal of Honor from President, who in fact was in a different place. That was in Afghanistan, but not where I was. And so the fact that the whole purpose of what I was saying did not in any way affect my point. They're incredibly brave, decent, honorable men and women in the military who in fact are like any other generation, only even have done more. They've saddled up, they've gone out, they've wiped the blood off of these Humvees, they've got back out, they get out again, they go out again and again and again. I was making a point about a generation. That has nothing to do with the judgment of whether or not you send troops to war, the judgment of whether you bring someone home, the judgment of whether or not you decide on a healthcare policy.
Not
you
judgment,
understand
Mr.
that.
President. No, not judgment, but details. Because that's something I've heard from some voters, maybe not at your events, but details.
No, but the details are irrelevant in terms of decision-making if, in fact, I forget that it was Rodriguez of all the times. I've been in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq and Bosnia and Kosovo as much as anybody except maybe my deceased friend John McCain and maybe Lindsey Graham. And so the fact that I would forget that it was Rodriguez who was pinning, I believe this is the case, pinning a Bronze Star on a young man, it's irrelevant to the point. It's like saying I had this very bright reporter and I think her eyes were blue. What difference would it make about whether you were a bright reporter? Your eyes are brown. It's irrelevant, and you know it.